Well, as the first group of Israeli hostages are freed from Hamas captivity, the ceasefire deal that enabled that to happen is turning into a political headache for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with several high-profile resignations from his cabinet. So is Mr. Netanyahu facing another political crisis, and can he survive it? Tovah Lazaroff is the former deputy managing editor of the Jerusalem Post, and she joins me now. Tovah, good to have you on the program. As I mentioned in the introduction, there are three senior members of the Prime Minister's cabinet have quit because of this ceasefire deal. And one of them, Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, he claims that the PM surrendered to what he labeled a terror deal. Now, given that they are from a far-right party and there was always a ceasefire deal in the making, so were these resignations inevitable?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, Ben-Gvir is polling very well, right? So should Netanyahu's government fall apart, he can almost be certain that he would get elected back into the parliament in the next election. So in a way, he has nothing to lose. His voters don't support the deal. By going out, he becomes a spokesperson for all those on the right who don't like this deal. They're more likely to support him next time. His popularity will only grow by going out of the government, and therefore he really has nothing to lose at this point by leaving. The government is already, halfway through its term. So, and he's been there 2 years, which is a respectable amount of time. His partner on the right, who also opposes the deal, Bezalel Smotrich, that's the religious Zionist party, you'll know he stayed in. That's because he's not polling well. And he's unlikely to pass the threshold. So therefore, he wins it's better for him to stay in. Netanyahu can sustain the loss because he expanded his government earlier. So this is a win-win for Ben-Gvir. In the long run, it doesn't hurt Netanyahu, and in a way, it helps him because he's going to need to maybe take positions under Trump that Ben-Gvir would anyway have opposed. So if he didn't go out on this, he would go out on something else.
Yes. So with these two parties in the coalition that were with Benjamin Netanyahu, if they weren't there to support a ceasefire, what would they have wanted as far as this conflict in the Middle East is concerned?
Oh, I mean, well, what Ben-Gvir thinks is that we should have a deal that doesn't stop the fighting in Gaza. He's nervous that this deal will eventually undo all the military success of the last year. He feels that this deal leaves Hamas in power, that it shows weakness on Israel's part, that it's only a matter of time before Hamas regroups and can attack Israel. He thinks that the terrorists that were released are only likely to kill more Israelis. So for him, this deal is a lose-lose. He thinks that Israel should win the battle against Hamas totally. The total victory will allow for the release of the hostages without having to make the same kinds of concessions, and or that the IDF would ultimately find them, as it has been doing in pockets, and secure their release that way. It's, in terms of the hostages, that's a very sketchy road, because every day that they're in Gaza is the day as we've seen that their lives are in danger. It's not clear that Israel would be able to rescue them or find them. So obviously, if the deal itself is the only way to get the hostages home alive, but it comes at a cost for many of Israel's war goals. And, Ben-Gvir is upholding that viewpoint.
Yes, and I'm quite curious to know, I mean, you mentioned earlier that Ben-Gvir, he is polling quite well in that aspect. Do you think he can sustain that until the next election? And do these resignations in any way threaten Benjamin Netanyahu's hold on power? Does his government risk collapsing altogether further down the line?
No, this does not pose a risk to Netanyahu, and it doesn't pose a risk to Ben-Gvir. That's why it's going to happen. I think Ben-Gvir can most assuredly sustain his popularity. Of course, it's hard to tell because I think that the next election is going to involve new politicians who are going to change the configuration of the parties no matter what. But I think in any scenario, he represents a certain voice. He's shown that he has, staying power among the voters. And I think no matter how you look at it, he will certainly be in the next parliament. Whether or not he'd be in the next government is another question. But I think the goal here is to get into the parliament. That's how you sustain your political lifeline in Israel. And so I think this, in a way, this helps Netanyahu and it helps Ben-Gvir. And I don't see it as a loss for either of them.
Yes, of course, there's so much relief for families of the 3 hostages that have been freed. Is there confidence that the remaining hostages will eventually be freed?
No, I think people are very nervous that they won't be. People, if you remember, there was an initial deal in November 2023, right, when the stakes were much, much higher on all counts, and for Hamas. Like, if Hamas had been able to sustain that deal and move that into a ceasefire, so many people in Gaza would not have suffered as much or would have been killed. Same on the Israeli side. So, and that ceasefire deal fell apart within a week. So I think people are very fearful that this deal will fall apart. This is a very protracted deal. It's 6 weeks. And every day is a day that it can fall apart. You're going to see the hostages come home in small groups. And then after that, not all the hostages are slated to be released. There's 93 remaining hostages in Gaza. Only 33 are coming back. So you have another 60 left, of which about only half are alive. Those next group are slated to be released in the second part of the deal. It took 8 months to negotiate just this part of the deal. Just want to remind everybody that what's been agreed upon is only phase 1 of a 3-phase deal. So you still have to negotiate phase 2, and it took them 8 months to negotiate this one. And as I said before, every day that the hostages are there is a day that they can be killed. So it is, on one hand, the most exciting moment, and also a more fearful moment, because with the level of excitement and anticipation also, raises the level of angst about those who remain and need to come out. It reminds everybody that these are very much live hostages who are, waiting to be freed.
Okay, Tovah Lazaroff, really good to get your insights there from Jerusalem. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.